My name's Dane Millerd. I'm a filmmaker, journalist and freelance multimedia specialist. I got started in film going back, I suppose I was about 14 or 15. I had access to my auntie's camera and shot a Vietnam War film in the Gundarra Golf Course and surrounding areas. And I knew then and there, this is what I want to do. Because I'm a journalist originally, my dad's a journalist, my wife's a journalist, we've got a whole bunch of family members who are journalists. In a previous life, when I wasn't working in rural newspapers, I was doing some work for Picture magazine. Not the naughty stuff, but all the real crazy, quirky stories that I know, I'm sure some people read them. And it might be a guy who's got a car made out of Bundy cans, or it might be another guy who's got a house made out of metal or whatever it is. And because Gundarra, where I'm from, is not far from the Pilliga, obviously I spent a bit of time out there camping and pig chasing and different things, and started to meet a whole bunch of people. And then they started opening up to me, and I started getting more and more of these stories and testimonials and eyewitness accounts. And then I did some more and more digging, and I thought, out of all the kind of local legends that I'd been researching over the years and that I'd been writing about, the Pilliga is definitely one of the strongest ones. I put it up there with Sweetheart the Crocodile up in Darwin. I put it there with the Nullarbor Nymph and Mungo Man and a whole bunch of others. And then, like I said, when people knew that I was going to do a film on it, the floodgates opened and I started getting all these testimonials and eyewitness accounts, and some of which have come anonymously and I'm sworn to secrecy over. But others, people are more than happy to kind of trumpet it from the rooftops as to what they've seen, because they're convinced something's out there. I suppose more specifically, would have been 2002, I was writing an article for the now defunct Aussie Post magazine. It used to be Australasia Post back in the day. And I was writing an article on Wobbegar, which was the poorest town in New South Wales. It had a median income of $118 a week. And I was out there doing this story, and they'd lost their only liquor licence at the pub for some guy who needed it for the Olympics. Their school had burnt down, their hall had burnt down. 10 timber mills had closed in the preceding 10, 20 years. The roads out there were that bad in the Pilliga that the ambulance would only meet them 25 k's out of town. And when one person went shopping, they'd usually shop for about 10 people, and this is Australia, only 8 hours from here as we sit. And it was then where I met a couple of key people who would be vital later on when I was going to shoot Pilliga, who I kept in touch with, and who started putting me in touch with other people as well. And some of the stories that I've been told really make the hair stand up on the back of your neck, I can assure you. Traditionally, I did a little bit of research. One of our EPs, Ros Wilson, used to be the vice president of Village Roadshow many, many years ago, Roadshow features, I think. And anyway, we'd done a little bit of research well before the shoot. Traditionally, the easiest, most attainable and affordable things to do are either children's films or horror films. But when I say children's films, I'm not talking animation in 3D, I'm talking traditionally like your standard 2D stuff, because usually they revolve around simple storylines, kind of very truncated kind of themes and characters. And horror films, on the other hand, are often very affordable and very cheap to do as well. And so, a perfect example is I actually own the rights to a book on Australia's Last Lady Bushranger. Now, she died in 1936. It's predominantly set in the early 1900s. She was in the circus, all this stuff. So how am I going to, say, get 50 horses, a circus, period costumes, all that kind of stuff? So I would have loved to have, say, done that, but you've got to work kind of with what you've got, what's attainable and what you can afford. And so I thought, well, a found footage film on the Pilliga is attainable, and it's going to serve a few purposes. Firstly, it's going to get me and other people's names recognised and out there a little bit. How far, I didn't know. But I also knew it could be very cheap to make, because at the very least I could use one camera, and we did. We used a Canon 5D Mark II. But I also knew that it could be made on a shoestring, and found footage films are divisive films. People either like them or they don't. Horror films, people either like them or they don't. And being a journalist, you always know that you want to write things or create things that get people talking and that are controversial. And so as a horror film itself, it's not the most horrific at all, but because of how it was executed and what we did, I knew that it would serve those purposes. And yeah, it has. I've had some people, you know, think it's great, and they're distributing the film and, I don't know, sending me nude selfies on Facebook, and I've had other people who want to, I don't know, chase me out of town. I'd done a bit of research on that because Blair Witch obviously was a template and obviously an inspiration. With Blair Witch, they had 3 groups of 3 and they had a 60-page kind of manifesto manuscript thing to follow each, which wasn't a script per se, and it was more like a geocaching exercise whereby they'd go from point to point, each get an envelope, open it up, and they couldn't tell the other one what was in their own envelope. So for argument's sake, one of the characters says, his envelope says, you've got to lose the map. And of course he lost the map. He wasn't allowed to tell the others until it happened because he threw it away. I ummed and ahed about doing it as a geocaching exercise, but for insurance purposes and reasons, you can run a risk of, you know, even though the authenticity and the spontaneity is a gift, you run the risk of possibly not getting what you want. And when you're spending other people's money, it's one of those things where, you know, what do I do, or do I script this? And so we made the hard decision that we were going to script it, and we made the hard decision to kind of make it a really slow burn, because I was mindful, gee whiz, the first half an hour of this film is a slow burn and you've got to be patient with it. But the payoff obviously comes later, because from about the 35-minute mark, it's, all right, hang on, that's really kind of eye-opening. That's and then all of a sudden the dynamic changes, and so I had to script it to the point where I wanted everyone to feel like they knew the characters, and I wanted them to think, basically, hang on, I feel like I'm watching a comedy here. I don't even feel like I'm watching a horror film at all. You know, this is actually really, really funny. This is kind of more like an episode of Housos or Struggle Street or something. But then it turns very, very nasty very, very quickly. And in terms of horror films, like I said, it's not the nastiest, but it appears scarier and nastier than what it is, because the first half an hour is so light and so funny and, you know, like I said, just the exact opposite to how the last 50 minutes is. Paul Denham's my co-producer on this. We own a company called Local Legends Entertainment. Prior to Pilliga, we've done a pilot for a TV show called Terror Australis on Dark Aussie Local Legends. So between us, we've travelled around Australia, accrued about 40 hours worth of footage, 30,000 photos, interviewed dozens of people. And some of these stories have come from people who have only ever told us, and pulled them out of boxes from under their bed. And because I'm a firm believer as a journalist, and certain people who have mentored me in film have told me that it is all about the story. It's all about how compelling the story is. You know, if you can have the best actors, you can have the best DOP, you can have the best of everything, but if the story's not there, it doesn't matter. They can't save it because it's not compelling. Some could argue my film's not compelling, that's fine. But all will agree, though, that it's intriguing, and it's one of those films that you do have to look at again. So I worked on the theory that, okay, hopefully that means in some cases they pay to watch it twice. And so the DOP and I spent a lot of time travelling around to different places. Yes, firstly as part of the TV series that we've done the pilot for, but then more specifically camping in the Pilliga, just he and I, for weeks sometimes on end, driving around and familiarising ourselves with all the people and places and picking all the locations. And I've probably spent in the vicinity of about 3 months out there with just him. And that's not counting other trips I did with other people, sometimes when it was raining and we were flooded in because the water's got nowhere to go out there. And other times when it was like 45-degree heat and we had goannas try and eat our lunch. So we've had some experiences out there. And yeah, I've got to say, if you know, you really want to capture kind of something. Authenticity is a big thing. We could have, for argument's sake, gone and shot this at Londonderry at the foot of the Blue Mountains. It's got red soil and a lot of the same plant life as the Pilliga, but it's got the Blue Mountains in the background. There's people who sit around with nothing better to do other than to pick up on stuff like that. You know, Ben-Hur, I'm sure it was Ben-Hur, where Charlton Heston was on the chariot, and in the background you could see cars on the Pacific Highway and Roman soldiers wearing gold watches. Okay, it won 10 or 11 Oscars, that's great, but for found footage films, a lot of people are sitting there and they're looking for the holes, and they're looking for the problems in continuity and all that stuff. And so no, we tried to make a concerted effort to make it as authentic as we could and spend a lot of time out there. Pilliga Forest is 3,000 square kilometres of red dirt, pine trees and gum trees. It was immortalised in a song by the late Slim Dusty, who wrote a song called There's Something in the Pilliga about a truckie coming face to face with a yowie. Now, even though that's not why I named it that, the reason why I did name it that is because a lot of people I spoke to, the throwaway line would always be, there's something in the Pilliga, you know. And I thought, okay. Pilliga being an Aboriginal word, I knew was always going to have difficulty resonating worldwide, particularly in the States, and so I had to brace myself with the fact that it could have a name change over there, which it still may. But I thought, no, in Australia, anyone that's got half an idea of what the Pilliga is going to check it out just because of the title. Some people swear that it's a yowie, other people swear that it's a guy in a goatskin suit that kind of scares the hell out of backpackers and truckies and all that stuff. Now, I've had 2 people admit to me that they do that, who remain anonymous. But it's also a hotspot for not just yowie sightings, but the Pilliga princess, Claire Wisbon. She died in 1993, and she used to walk up and down the highway pushing a Woolworths trolley or carrying a knapsack, and sometimes truckies, on the rare occasion, would pull over there, and she'd come there in the middle of the night and shake the truck and knock on the window because she'd want a lift, or she'd want to, you know, kind of, how do I put it, have some fun with the truckies. Well, one night she got hit by a truck, but now people reckon they see her ghost along the highway. And the argument was that she walked along the highway, the yowie would shadow her about 50 metres inside on the scrub line to make sure nothing ever happened to her. It's 110 k's between Coonabarabran and Narrabri, and truckies won't stop there, very rarely. In the old days they did a little bit more because the awareness wasn't there as much. Won't stop there now. No one stops there now, particularly at night, because it's just got a feeling to it. I can't describe it to you. I've been to a lot of places in Australia. Like I said, I was in Cairns here recently, and you know, wasn't that far from a 14-foot crocodile, but even that kind of didn't bother me like being out there does. There's just a feeling to that place, like there's eyes on you all the time. And like I said, yeah, it's one of those places though that you've still got to go out and check out yourself, because it doesn't matter what I say, you know, you've still got to go out there and have a look.